because there's no point in even wasting your time reading one line of a textbook unless we are going to study enough to actually do well on the final. It's like completely wasted effort. It's like, okay, I'm going to dig a well and the water is 100 feet deep. And if the water is 100 feet deep, there is no point in digging 5 feet down. It is literally a waste of effort. So this is where a lot of people make a mistake. They think just get started. But if you really pay attention to yourself, we've given this advice to everyone. Not everyone is getting started. Many people are not getting started. Procrastination is getting worse, not better. Today, we're going to talk about how to short circuit procrastination without really using willpower. Now, this may sound kind of weird because when we think about procrastination, we think like, oh, the way to overcome procrastination is discipline, willpower. Maybe we need to work on our emotions. But if you understand the science of how procrastination works in the brain, and specifically, we're going to be talking about working memory today. If you understand how working memory works, then we'll actually figure out a really interesting technique that can help a lot with procrastination. So let's take a look at procrastination and what goes on in your mind when you procrastinate. So here's you. And here's the task that you want to do. Here's the task that you should do. You should study. And then here's what you want to do. You want to play video games. I don't know about y'all, but right now I want to play video games. I could play some No Man's Sky. I could play some Dota. I could do anything except for make this video, okay? And so here's what we normally find, right? We're in this situation where there's a tension between these two things. And what we try to do is we exert willpower to try to push things in this direction. And we exert willpower to push things in this direction. Or we'll use things like habits. We're kind of here in the middle, we're conflicted, and we'll do whatever we can to push things towards study. But then at some point, maybe this stuff will run out, and then we end up snapping back towards video games. So this is the first type of procrastination, right? But if we really look at our mind, what we find is it's not quite that simple. Because sometimes when you need to study and you end up playing video, and you think to yourself, oh, I shouldn't play video games because I need to study. What do you actually end up doing? You end up wasting some time on scrolling, right? And when we procrastinate, it's not like we just don't want to study. We also need to take out the trash. And then we also really should update our resume, right? And then it's not just video games and scrolling. Maybe it's a touch of the porn. Watch a little bit of porno. So if we really look at the nature of procrastination, what we tend to find is that there tend to be a handful of things that we don't want to do that we're procrastinating towards, and then a handful of things that we tend to end up procrastinating with. When people hear about our coaching program, their first response is usually, why would I work with another human being when I can watch YouTube videos all on my own? Working with a coach is about amplifying your time and effort. We're great at wanting things and even making some progress, but we usually struggle with follow-through or have some kind of setback. And that's exactly where working with a coach can help. Coaches provide personalized support to help you set appropriate goals, make progress, and even work through setbacks. Just let us know what your goals are, what kind of support you're looking for, and we'll match you with the best coach for your unique needs. Check out the link in the description below to see if coaching is right for you. So if we look at the struggle of procrastination in our mind, it is basically a 3v3. So when you actually pay attention to how you procrastinate, you aren't actually thinking about the million things that you actually need to do, and you're not thinking about distracting yourself with all of the options, right? So if you really pause and think about it, there's a lot of stuff that you could do. You could go to the gym. You could order some stuff for a party. You could text people that you've lost touch with, right? You could even do 10 push-ups. You don't have to go to the gym. Just do 10 push-ups. There's lots of options. And there are also lots of things that you could avoid your tasks with. Like, it's not just video games, scrolling, and porn. You may be able to avoid by reading a book. You may be able to avoid by going for a walk. There's all kinds of options down here. But in our experience of procrastination, we don't think about those options. And the reason for this is because of something called working memory. So it turns out that because of our working memory, we are only able to hold a certain number of conflicts in our mind. And our working memory is only able to resist a limited number of things. So this is really important. Our working memory is only able to crave a limited number of things, right? So you can't use the sentence, I crave, period. That's not a sentence. Does that make sense? Crave requires an object. So I crave a pizza. I crave a donut. I crave love. I crave I don't know, appreciation from other human beings. So craving and resistance in our mind are actually like highly specific and localized to what is in our working memory at the time. So we discovered this principle in addiction psychiatry. And once we started working with this principle of working memory, it turns out that we can teach someone who is like addicted to methamphetamine or crack cocaine or opiates or marijuana. We can use this principle to overcome the strong biological drive to engage in an addiction. And we use this technique very interestingly in a phase of something called motivational interviewing, which is an evidence-based technique that we use in addiction psychiatry, and we use it in something called the planning phase. So here's what we figured out. If you take a patient who, let's say, is addicted to alcohol, and they come into my office and I'm a psychiatrist, and I'm like, you know what? I'm psychiatrist, trained at Harvard, man, come on. Listen to me, I have all the answers. We have MAT, medication-assisted treatment. We have psychotherapy, peer support. I will tell you, take this medication. Come to me and I will therapize you. And go to Alcoholics Anonymous and talk about your problems. If you do these 3 things, you will be cured. And then the patient is like, okay, doc. And then they proceed to do none of those things, right? So there is the ideal scenario which you are pushing them towards. They resist those particular things and they end up doing whatever the hell they want. So what did we discover in motivational interviewing? We discovered that the best way to start is not by telling them what they should do. Okay, so here's 2 ends of a spectrum. Let's take a look at this. So here's 2 ends of a spectrum of behavior: to drink or not drink, right? These are the 2 ends of the spectrum. And basically what happens is they have a lot of trouble avoiding this, and they have a lot of trouble doing this. So when we think about procrastination, right, we're jumping between these 2 poles. Do I play video games or do I study? There's nothing in between. And now here's the problem, is to not drink invites the highest form of resistance and increases our chances of failure the most, right? And drinking is the easiest thing to do. So this requires 0 willpower. And so if we give in, then we're kind of screwed. It's very, very easy to play video games, right? It doesn't cost you anything. So the cost here is too high and the cost here is too low. So what do? We ask them, what can you do? We move somewhere over here, somewhere over here, somewhere over here, or somewhere over here. And most of the times when we procrastinate, we don't think to ourselves, oh, I need to study, right? What we actually think to ourselves is, I need to study. And this is a very vague idea. What does study mean? Well, I have a final on Friday. So what does study even mean? We don't say to ourselves, I just need to study, period, right? The thought is unformed. Our working memory can only have so much RAM, so it doesn't think about what all the steps of studying are. We never say to ourselves, I'm going to study for 15 minutes. We never say to ourselves, I'm going to study for 30 minutes. We never say to ourselves, oh, I'm going to just finish this worksheet and then I play games. But then you will say, hold on, Dr. K, you're wrong. How so, dear listener? Well, sometimes I do say that. Oh, very interesting. And when you do say that, what happens? Well, I end up doing it more easily. And this is what we learned from motivational interviewing. That what we really want to do is, I'm going to boil this down to a principle: do the next best thing. What does that mean, the next best thing? If you can't do this thing, do the next best thing. If you want to bump it down 1 spot, go for it. If you want to bump it down to, oh, that's too much to do, then do 2 steps lower. Do the next best thing. And this is what we do in motivational interviewing. We don't tell someone medication-assisted treatment, Alcoholics Anonymous, and psychotherapy once a week, twice a week if you want to get better faster. What we ask people is, what can you do? And when we procrastinate, we never ask ourselves, so recognize this. Procrastination is not about what you can do. It is about forcing yourself to do what you should do. But I want y'all to think about this for a second, because this is insane. You are not operating on what you are actually capable of. You are operating on wishes and hopes and dreams, not what you're capable of. So what do we want to do? We want to find all of these tasks in the middle, right? We want to think about all of these tasks over here. Okay, so if you can't drink, then what are we going to do? Okay, I'm going to avoid drinking today. Avoid drinking at the barbecue, okay? So for whatever you're procrastinating, give up on it. Don't do this thing. Try to figure out, what can you do? Okay, I can't take out the trash. Can you take all of the cups and glasses next to your computer and at least put those in the trash? Can you do this? What can you do? This is the main question you need to ask yourself. What can I get away with before I start scrolling? I'm going to at least take 5 cups to the sink before I pull out my phone. Okay? So if you engage in this, what we know from evidence-based studies on overcoming addictions is that this is the right way to do it. So the way to get from this is where we don't want to be, right? So I kind of flipped the axes last time, but this is bad and this is good. So what we want to do is find something in the middle. Now, here's another really, really, really cool thing. So a lot of people will look at this and they'll say, oh, I've tried this before, and sometimes what I need to do is I need to move from bad to here. So let me do the smallest thing first, right? Let me just get started. There's this idea of getting started. All I need to do is get started. So it turns out that getting started is one of the worst things that you can do. Now, you may wonder to yourself, hold on, Dr. K, what does that mean? Getting started is the worst thing that I can do. I thought everyone's saying all you need to do is just get started. There's some value to that, but here's what we learned from motivational interviewing. So remember that we're looking at state number 1 and state number 2, okay? Now, here are the problems psychologically with getting started. If I tell you to get started, so you tell me, right? Because we've already figured this out. People have told you, oh, just get started. And you're like, yeah, that works some of the time. It works really well when I do it. Well, hold on a second. If it works so well, why don't you do it all the time? It's because getting started actually creates resistance. So if I tell you, oh yeah, like just take 1 cup and put it in the trash. And then what does your mind say? Your mind says, not enough, right? And now something really interesting is happening in your working memory. Your working memory, anytime it tries to give you a task, right? When it tries to get you to do something, it thinks about the outcomes. And I want y'all to answer a question for me. What is the point of doing something if it doesn't solve the problem? Like, so what is the point if I have a final on Friday? What is the point of reading 1 line of a textbook? My brain is actually going to say that is the biggest waste of time, because there's no point in even wasting your time reading 1 line of a textbook unless we are going to study enough to actually do well on the final. It's like completely wasted effort. It's like, okay, I'm going to dig a well and the water is 100 feet deep. And if the water is 100 feet deep, there is no point in digging 5 feet down. It is literally a waste of effort. So this is where a lot of people make a mistake. They think just get started. But if you really pay attention to yourself, we've given this advice to everyone. Not everyone is getting started. Many people are not getting started. Procrastination is getting worse, not better. There's a second problem with just getting started, which is that you are actually capable of so much more, right? So if you can push yourself to get started, it's not like putting 1 cup away and 5 cups away is actually that much work, right? So if I tell you, okay, like what's harder, reading 1 line of a textbook or reading 5 lines of a textbook? And you're like, well, the pain in the ass is getting the textbook out and opening it. If I'm going to do 1, I might as well do 5. Now, when you do this, there's a very, very, very important cognitive difference. So the work of pulling out the textbook and reading 1 line is the same as the work of pulling out the textbook and reading 5 lines. The difference is that your dopaminergic brain and your nucleus accumbens and your working memory say that one gains more benefit than the other. So it actually increases motivation. So this is why in motivational interviewing, remember, what is the technique that we use? We say, do the next best thing. Don't do the first thing. Don't do the weakest thing. We don't tell people, let's start with the basics. Do the tiniest amount. Oh, for your addiction treatment, just do this. Just don't drink when you're in the bathroom today. We don't actually tell people to start with the smallest thing. What we ask people is, what can you do? So what we really want to do is not actually start at the beginning, because that does not give our brain a sense of enough gain from an action, right? Because there's a cost-benefit analysis. This is why what we actually want to do is be as close to this as possible. So if you can't do this, then can you do this? If you can't do this, can you do this? So this is why we tell people, what can you do? Well, I can not drink during the week. Well, holy crap. It's a good thing as a therapist that I didn't tell you just to drink today, because we would have lost so much ground. And so it is very inefficient to focus on just getting started. Instead, what we want to do, if this is too hard, no big deal. How much can we get, right? This is the gap that we want to try to cover, and we want to try to maximize that gap as much as possible. So if you are procrastinating, you have to understand working memory. And if you understand working memory, then you will understand that there are actually many easy ways for you to do stuff. You just have to not fight the fight that is in your head. Because once your brain wants a particular thing and wants to avoid a particular thing, this conflict is kind of locked in, and we already know it takes a bunch of willpower to move from here to here. So instead, what we want to do is create option C, option D, option E, and those things won't have the same amount of resistance. And I don't know if y'all have experienced that, but that's just like true, right? So if I have a 5-year-old who's like, I don't want to eat broccoli. And I'm like, okay, how about green beans? They're like, I don't want to eat green beans. And I'm like, okay, how about radishes? I don't want to eat radishes. And it's like, well, what do you want to eat? I want to eat gummy bears. I want to eat cookies. Well, it's like, okay, like, well, what about an apple? Kid is like, I don't want to, but okay, fine. How about apples and peanut butter? Okay, fine. So if you've like worked with kids or you've negotiated with humans, what you oftentimes find is that there's a lot of stuff that we're willing to do in the middle between what we should do and what we want to do. There's a big gap in there. The problem is literally our brain, our working memory, does not consider those possibilities. There's one last trick that I'm going to teach y'all to reset your working memory and help you with this. And that is literally walking through a door. So there's this really interesting neuroscientific or psychological principle called the doorway effect. And the doorway effect is the reason, I don't know if this has ever happened to y'all, but if you walk, you know, like if you're like in a room and I'm like, oh, like I need to go grab something. And then you leave the room and you walk over to the next room and you're like, I don't remember why I'm here. I forgot what I'm doing here. We'll like forget things, right? We forget things all the time. Oh, I have to go upstairs and I have to get a glass of water. I have to grab my toothbrush. I have to grab a change of clothing. And then you go upstairs. You knew the 3 things that you needed to grab, but when you go upstairs, you leave one room, you walk upstairs, you walk into another room. And what you tend to find is that your working memory literally resets. And this can be useful for resolving an internal conflict. So we can harness the doorway effect. So anytime, you know, I have patients who are struggling with addiction, I strongly encourage them, or people who are procrastinating, take a walk and try to go through a couple of doorways if you can. So if you walk out of the door to your room and you walk out of the door to your house and you make one circuit around the block, you'll notice that your thinking will automatically change. If you are struggling to play a video game sitting in front of your computer and you literally go for one walk around the block, the struggle will feel very different. And that is literally because we are resetting your working memory. It's stuck in this like conflicted process that is hogging up all of your system resources. And the one simple way to turn it off and turn it on again is to go for a walk, to walk through as many doorways as possible. I guess if you've got a list of arches, that works too. So if you're struggling with procrastination, understand the science of working memory, understand the science of motivational interviewing, and start to harness those principles and make things way easier on yourself while you get way more stuff done. Hey y'all, hope you enjoyed today's video. We talk about a bunch of topics like this on the channel, so be sure to subscribe for more. If you're already subscribed, GG, and we'll see you in chat.